Hello everyone, today we're going to be ranking every Salmon Run stage from both Splatoon 2 and 3. I think Salmon Run stages are a very underappreciated thing and I don't see too many people talking about how well all the stages play compared to each other. So today we're going to be changing that. I'll be ranking off the map layout on different tides, overall appeal of the map, difficulty, and King Salmonoid playability when possible. I'll also occasionally give my input on where I see the map could use some changes wherever I see fit. So if you enjoy the video, be sure to like and subscribe, and without further ado, let's get right into it. I'll start with Splatoon 3 stages in order of release and end with the last two unadded stages. Starting with Sockeye Station, which in all honesty is a very middle of the pack stage. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the stage is bad. The center tower area and basket spot are pretty well designed, and while the low tide area can be difficult in some ways, I do think it's challenging and different from the rest of the stage in the right way. So I'm gonna put it in A tier. The map is great, but it just barely misses the mark of a perfect stage. Playing Kings on it works really well, and it's very playable, but it just isn't very interesting to play on overall, and its aesthetics are very average and similar to other maps. It's definitely a stage where I feel most beginners wouldn't really struggle with playing on the stage at all. With that being said, I don't know how I could improve the map with any changes either, so I'm just gonna leave it as it is for now. It's a great map, just not a perfect one. Up next we have Spawning Grounds. D tier. I think everyone and their mother can agree with that take, so let me just talk about the positives of the map first. The area for glowflies and grillers is actually quite a nice spot that's close to basket for easy egg collection, which is great for those waves. I also really like the look of the map with the tall pillars with cables stringing from one to another. And additionally, while I do have some strong opinions on the gray area on this map, I do appreciate the devs experimenting with unique stage hazards for Salmon Run. I put this one in D tier for a few reasons, but mainly it just boils down to this gray area. It just doesn't work. I understand the idea behind it is to make that part of the map more risky, but all it ends up doing is making people avoid that area, effectively halving the map's usable area. And on high tide, this issue is even more noticeable as only a small portion of the map is available to ink, with all the grates being above water. Flyfish especially like to perch up at the end of this bridge, which is unreasonably difficult to approach sometimes. If I were to make changes to this map, I'd probably give it a whole new rework and layout change, but I can't really do that yet, so instead I would replace a few of the grates with some inkable turf. I also feel the usage of grates is a bit lopsided, so I would maybe spread the love to other parts of the map, such as adding a small grate here on this perch to add some more space. Overall, the map is playable. I just think when compared to other stages on the list, it doesn't compete well in my opinion. Gonefish and Hydroplant I placed in B tier, which, hear me out before you get mad, I have reasoning for. I would put this map up higher, but it just feels a little too basic or generic in my opinion. I really like the setting of this map. The huge hydroelectric power plants around in the distance look really cool, but absolutely none of that is conveyed in the map itself at all. And you could probably put the map geometry in any other place and it probably wouldn't look out of place at all. This map is also a little too simple at high and normal tides, as basically the most optimal strategy is to set up at these front two blocks and take down globals and lure everything else. And you can essentially splat most things even with medium ranged weapons on this high ground. Low tide is a bit more interesting on this stage, but this bridge has me conflicted. On one hand, I do find the layout interesting, but on the other hand, I've had too many games where I need a few more eggs, but they're all stacked at the middle of the bridge behind two steelheads, a scrapper, and a slammin lid, and then we lose. I think the execution could be done a little better. There isn't really much else to say about it though. It isn't a bad map by any means. In fact, I do like playing on it, but I do think it could be made more appealing gameplay wise in my opinion. If I were to make changes, I would take one side of the stage with this block on it and make it more exposed. I think that would make players move around a little bit more as well as spice up the map a bit. On top of that, adding a small jump you can make to the top level from the shore where salmonoids spawn on normal tide could be a cool addition. Something like a small crate or box that could be paintable where you can make a short jump to get to high ground. Similar to how one of the fish stick spawns can be used to gain access to the top of the map if it sets up there. I'd also try and add a few more possible routes for salmonoids to take on low tide. Not many, maybe even just one more to stop the main bridge from being so congested. I'd also like to move the basket back a little bit more toward these stairs here to make players more likely to bring bosses closer to the basket. Next is Marooner's Bay, which I'm going to put in C tier. Now, I really want to like this map more. I love the idea of a Salmon Run stage taking place on a maroon ship as well as the gimmick, but it's just not executed well, honestly. In Splatoon 2, when we didn't have egg throwing, this map was awful, but even in 3, where egg collection is more manageable, I still feel it doesn't excuse the map's flaws. The map more or less pushes players to fight on a straight line on normal and high tides, and dropping down to the sandbar area on both sides of the ship is almost always a mess in casual and solo play. There just aren't many ways back up to the ship, and it can cause wipeouts very easily. With that being said though, I do like the difficulty of being on the shore compared to the ship deck's safety, but I think the difficulty should be adjusted a bit by adding a few paintable walls here and there. And aside from a few layout changes on the boat itself, I think the stage is pretty solid. But compared to other stages on the list, I just think the spot is deserved. If Bone Rattle Arena was never released, I think Jammin Slam Junction would have taken S tier, but now that I know what Nintendo is capable of, I had to put it into A tier. And to be honest, most of my critiques for this map are more or less nitpicks. The only real issues this stage has is that battling King Salmonids on high tide is absolutely awful. Koizuna is like a brick wall, and the same goes for Megalodontia. I wasn't able to beat Trumvite on hazard level max during big runs, so I had to reattempt it on this map at high tide, and it was very cramped with all the bosses on stage. I did get the decoration though. With that said, I like the gimmick, if you can even call it that, of the stage being effectively split in half. It divides up Salmonoids really well and makes them not clump up too much. If I were able to make any changes though, I'd maybe try and extend the top area back a bit. Not a lot, but maybe just enough to make Kings on high tide a bit more manageable. Maybe it could be a King exclusive thing for high tide where some barges are placed around the back for extra movement or something. I don't know, that's Nintendo's job. But all in all, pretty solid map and just barely misses S tier. Coming up next is Salmon Smokeyard, and I will say in Splatoon 2 and early in 3 I didn't like this map at all, and I probably would have ranked it lower, but I've come to appreciate it a lot more since then. I'll be putting it in B tier. I actually like the gimmick of the two fan platforms to separate the stage on normal and high tide. Occasionally a fish stick can be placed in the middle pool to allow for even more movement as well, which I think is a really cool addition. This also might be a hot take, but I really like the way low tide has been done on this map. It feels really open and a breath of fresh air compared to the other two tides on the map, although the map still has some issues in my opinion. On high tide it can be quite difficult to battle Kings. I find it to be more manageable than Jammin Slam Junction, but it's still difficult. And although at the time of filming this video we haven't had a Trumvite on this stage, I'm sure there would not be much room to move around on high tide, which knocks it down a bit. This is another nitpick of mine, but on normal tide the shore on this map just looks abysmal, like noticeably bad. You can basically see the landscaping tools they use to make the shore on whatever engine Splatoon is made in, and once you notice it you can't unsee it. So sorry if I ruined the map for you. I would have placed this map higher up, but I just think it doesn't deserve it when compared to the other ones up there. It's a pretty solid map all things considered, and you could make an argument to move it to an A tier, but it's also a bit samey and generic when considering other maps from the same era. If I were able to make any changes, I would probably make the moving platforms a little bit larger to make them more forgiving if one of your coworkers starts shooting it while you're trying to get on. I also feel the side of the map without the basket is kind of underused, so I think it would be interesting to develop it more and connect to the other side with a grind rail or ink rail. Not entirely sure about the changes though, so let me know what you think in the comments. And now we come to the final stage released for Salmon Run for Splatoon 3, Bone Rattle Arena, which I will be putting in S tier. Honestly, this map is the pinnacle of all Salmon Run maps, and it perfectly encapsulates what I think a good Salmon Run stage should have completely. The stage layout and terrain allows for great movement and displacement of bosses. There's plenty of room for battling Kings on all tides except maybe for high tide, which is a given. And the low tide is interesting and unique from the rest of the stage. Honestly, I don't really have anything bad to say about the stage. It's honestly in a really good state right now. The setting is great, the layout is near perfect, and it's an overall really fun stage to play and one of my top favorites. And to be honest, I can't think of anything to change with it really. The only thing else I really have to say is that in Splatoon 2, the last Salmon Run map had lore implications for Return of the Mammalians. So I wonder if this stage has any significance to Splatoon 4's story. And that's all the Splatoon 3 Salmon Run stages. Now we just have the two old maps from Splatoon 2, the Lost Outpost and Ruins of Ark Polaris. I'm honestly really curious to know the reason as to why these two stages weren't added. I mean, the maps are effectively done already and all they need is a graphics update and a port. But if I were to guess, it would be because of the new King Salmonid feature. These two stages have layouts that would make it very difficult to implement the extra wave without having heavy changes to the map. So instead of talking about how King Salmonids play on this map, I'm gonna just offer my ideas on how the stage could be adjusted to work with Kings instead. Starting off with Lost Outpost, which I feel like is a stage most people have forgotten about, which I think is kind of a shame as this map deserves a lot more attention than it really gets. So I'm putting it in A tier, but to be honest, it could even be a B tier. It could be S, but the map has one big flaw that I can't really ignore, which is the low tide area just being a bit too small. It mostly consists of paths that snake toward the basket, but I feel like it's just too constricted for a low tide wave and should be a bit more open. I also think if the map was ported as is, this low tide area would have the same issue as Gone Fission's low tide, where most of the eggs would get stuck farther back on the bridge in solo and casual play. I also think this gray area is a hard subject. It seems like a bit too much, but also with the new egg throw mechanic in Splatoon 3, it could actually be a fun area to play in. So I'm gonna leave it as it is. Obviously the center of attraction for this map is the fort area where the basket is, but it really poses some issues in 3 with extra wave. So if this map comes back in Splatoon 3, I think I would lower the walls substantially to allow for better king fighting play, especially with Ouroboros. I do think think I would keep the pillars at the height they are though, to still keep some of the map's original look. Additionally, I think some small areas in the wall could be replaced with grates that you could get through by moving in swim form. I think it will allow for more movement in the stage while still making it not just another opening. Overall solid map, and I'd be happy to see it back in Salmon Run if it ever does come back. And finally we come to the final Salmon Run stage, Ruins of the Ark Polaris. I put this map in S tier, which I feel to most is an obvious choice. The map is great overall, and it comes with the gimmick of verticality, which is a feature I'd love to see in more Salmon Run stages. The setting of the stage as well as its aesthetics are some of the best we've had out of all the current stages too, and the lore implications it had for Splatoon 3 was really cool foreshadowing. I also think the layout for this stage is especially unique. The use of grind rails and inkable walls helped to make the stage's verticality more manageable than it would have been otherwise. The low tide on this map is also still pretty serviceable, although being a bit similar to Sockeye Station's low tide in design. To make this map more usable on King Salmonids, I think it'd be smart to lower the amount of verticality in the stage and squish it down a bit to make a King Salmonid like Ouroboros more manageable, as well as making the path from the lower area to the top area where the basket is much wider with smaller obstacles to allow for more movement for kings like Kohozuna. I'd also make the grates that stick out from the sides much shorter to give more headroom for kings. But that's about it, and that's the last stage, so here's the final tier list. I thought this video would be pretty fun to make as I'm almost done getting 9s on every Salmon Run stage. I'm pretty happy with this tier list aside from 1 or 2 stages that could be moved up or down even. And if Salmon Run returns in the next game, I'll be sure to reorder and redo this list if that happens. Do keep in mind most of this is more or less my opinion. I strongly think that no Salmon Run stage we've ever gotten has been completely unplayable, just that some stages have more issues than others. But what do you think? What is the best Salmon Run stage in your opinion? Let me know in the comments, and be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. Peace. Yo, chill out, Cherry, it's not that serious. Cherry, oh god, help!